Hello, friends, and welcome to Stories from the Tool Shed. My name's Steven.
And my name's Tim, and we're excited to journey with you through the Spiritual Authority cohort. Let's get it!
Hey, Tim and I are looking outside as beautiful Thursday, and hey, back with you again. Wanted to give you a new podcast from Stories from the Tool Shed, actually talking about an additional story for the sake of the city. We have the privilege of actually sharing with you a testimony that we heard at the beginning of the cohorts that we've been waiting to share with you all. It really integrates a lot of what you've learned in the cohorts from blessing prayer and then at the end of talking about for the sake of the city. And we just thought we'd hold on to this because it's so special to tell you this testimony of a guy named Dave Larlee, one of our graduates out of Dallas, Texas. He's going to share his personal story of how he is taking the prayer tools, not only as an ordained pastor, but really as a small business owner, using these tools, especially blessing prayer in his day-to-day life and just asking God to use these tools for the renewal of his city and for those around him. And so we want you to hear the story of what God is still doing in Dave's life and how he redeemed really this moment of COVID in Dallas, Texas through a small business. So sit back, listen to this story.
So welcome, Dave, to the podcast. We're excited to have you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your context and how the cohort is going and has gone?
Oh, it's a pleasure to join y'all. You know, it's been amazing to see. We had some people do it last year, and then we asked if we could host it at All Saints, and we kind of did a little bit of just advertised it, and I think we have like 100 people, maybe even more, from the church doing it. And we're just so excited to see what God's going to do with that. And so from like a church point of view, that's been amazing. But what's blown my mind is revisiting all this stuff on authority, which is so good. I'm doing it now as a small business owner, and I'm making all of these connections I never would have made otherwise. Now, obviously, as a pastor, I believe deeply in the role of the church for like the redemption of the world. But I'm all of a sudden making these connections between the role that business can play that church can't, and probably church shouldn't, right? And so to me, we walked away, Rachel and I walked away like, that was awesome. And, you know, it was just, so I'm hugely encouraged. And I'm glad that, I'm just so thrilled that y'all are there and can keep teaching. You know, I kind of joke sometimes, say that I was part of the remedial class. And so, you know, it's good to have the catch up on authority. But no, I've loved it, and it's been so helpful for me personally.
Dave, tell us a little, so you have a business. What is your business?
So 2.5 years ago, a hobby turned into a business, and I was like, I need a hobby. I'll get a smoker. And I started smoking meat, and friends would bring their meat around and smoke it. Then they got lazy and said, hey, why don't you just smoke it and we'll buy it from you? And so 2.5 years ago, we started Smoke Maple. And it was just kind of, you know, an occasional thing. I did a quinceañera, catered for that, which was awesome. And then we were doing like pop-up. So the idea was to do serve Dallas by having these pop-up barbecue pits in people's backyards. And so we started doing that. And then awesome. COVID hit, and things just took off in an amazing way, in that people started to order from me because they were tired of cooking themselves. And they knew that only one pair of hands was going to be touching the food, so there was, you know, minimal risk there for those who were worried about COVID-19. And then, like, I started to see friends of mine who were doctors and nurses, and the stress of COVID just hitting them. And I thought, man, what could I do? Like, I don't have the answers to COVID. Like, I don't even know, like, you know, I didn't even do science, so I don't even understand a lot of the science behind this, but what can I do? And the Lord just prompted me to start giving barbecue away. And so I would let doctors and nurses who are working in the COVID unit say, hey, come around on Friday. I've got free barbecue for you. And they were like, this is the best email all week.
Wow.
And so the Smoked Maple is basically a Texas barbecue catering business. And, yeah.
Love it, man. So, we told you in the last podcast we wanted to hear from you guys. And so we wanted to bring Dave on this because he reached out to us, just told us some of what God's doing in his business. And Dave, I just share with our listeners, what is God doing with your barbecue business during this crazy season for us all? And how is that brought into blessing prayer? Love to hear from you about that, man.
Yeah, so I think at some point, I think it was in the lab, we were talking in my cohort group about how in the kingdom of God, to keep something, you've got to give it away, right? And so, and we just got talking, and I just started to make all these connections. So the first thing God, because business picked up, I was able to employ someone to help me. I went from, I think Rachel's fine with it. She hasn't said anything different. She is fine with it. But I went from having one smoker to 6 in the backyard. So and I only bought 2. So we started giving barbecue away. And after we'd given out 500 pounds of barbecue to people affected by COVID, the makers of the smoker I use, the pit barrel cooker, wrote to them, told them what was going on, just to encourage them, said, hey, we'd like to send you a 3rd barrel. So I was like, great. So, and then somebody else said, hey, I love what you're doing. I want to bless it. And then they started calling me as a nickname, oh, it's the priest pit boss. And so, it just kind of built on that. And then somebody recently bought me barrel number 5 and 6. So I've got, crazy capacity. And so all of these, as COVID went on these last 6 months, it's been phenomenal how it's like one compound fracture after another in our culture. And so we've got COVID, then the murder of George Floyd hit, right? And then I'm talking to our off-duty police who are doing our security, and they're feeling awful. So I said, hey, do you guys like barbecue? And you know what it's like when sometimes you just start talking before you're thinking. And I said, hey, come by Friday and I'll feed the night shift. And I was like, oh, wait.
Did I really say that?
And so, sure enough, Friday they pull up, and we loaded up 100 pounds of ribs into a cooler and fed the Dallas Police night shift. And then I bumped into somebody a great guy who's an activist for racial justice. And I said, hey, do you guys like barbecue? They're like, yeah. And I'm like, man, this is not a really good business model. I keep giving this stuff away. But I sent them 100 pounds of ribs, right? And then whenever a need came up, it was like, maybe we can't solve the problem, but maybe we can make life a little bit better. So we came up with a slogan that we're trying to bring joy to the world one rib at a time.
I love it.
And really trying to bless people so that they can keep bringing their best to the challenges they're facing. And so as we've poured into that, the business side has also gone up, which has been amazing.
So even the more that you're giving away, God is pouring back what you're giving and even more.
Yeah, it makes no sense. I can't figure out the formula for this in my Excel spreadsheet. And
I love it.
But also it's been rewarding for me because in pastoral ministry, never once did someone suggest I read Financing and Accounting for Dummies. But I've read it and it's like, oh, this is great. So anyway, so it's also been really rewarding and been a huge creative outlet in these last few months.
Oh, man. Something I'm even just hearing you say, Dave, is it's not a specific, kind of 2 things. It's not that people are coming up to you with the need. It's that you're finding the need as you're going. So I hear you saying that. And then the second thing I'm just even in your story is all of the diversity of people that you're serving, that God's opened up in such a hard time for many people. What has that been like to serve so many different groups of people?
what's amazing, and Tim, you know this from your barbecue experience, is like one of the most there's certain pockets of subculture where, take the race issue, like race is not an issue at all, and one of those subcultures is barbecue. Like, it's like everybody, there's just like this subcurrent of joy, and everybody's welcome to smoke, and let's just figure it out and do it. And so it's been great. The other thing too is all of a sudden I've found myself, having only lived in Dallas 7 years now, I'm in conversation with the police community. I'm in conversation with the black community. I'm in conversation with, the homeless community. I'm in, and the medical community. And people say, how is it that you know all these people? And I said, barbecue, and it's just, but here's the thing that I've been reflecting on it, Stephen, is that when the Lord wants to bless us, he blesses what's in our hands. And I just happened, and it's like I said when we were emailing, the Lord blessed me with a barbecue business, and it's almost now like over these last 6 months and coming up, we got another event coming. He said, "Hey, I need to borrow the business."
Yeah,
that's
great.
And who am I to say no, right? But it's such a faith journey, and it's really pushed me at times to the boundaries of, okay, Lord, here we go. Trust you. Let's jump off the cliff, see if you catch us. Figuratively, not literally, but yeah.
Yeah. So I got a question, Dave. One of the things I think that I hear you saying is a little bit like, and I love that quote, like God's going to use what's kind of already in your hands. A little bit. So for those that are listening, that are maybe a little bit still trying, maybe even like, well, gosh, what's in my hands? like what does that look like? Like, is that something that you came to realize after, or how does someone who's just listening is like, well, I want to lean into this. I see the power of blessing. I can maybe get on board with the fact that God wants to use me, but how do you actually take that first step out the door?
That we were talking about that just the other day, and I think I can't quite remember the circumstances, but Rachel and I were talking and looking at the different offerings that people would make in the Old Testament, like an offering to God for this, for that, a peace offering, and really it started out by just saying, Lord, I just want to offer this to you. And I found myself in conversation after the first cohort meeting with a guy who was a bit disturbed by when we had to stand up and identify, okay, who's a word person, who's a deed person, who's a power person. Yeah. And he's like, well, I know the word a little bit, but I'm not deed, or, I don't even think my job matters. And he's in oil and gas. Wow. And he's super generous, right, with his resources. He's just, and so I said, well, you do realize that Jesus' ministry was funded by Herod's treasurer's wife. Ministry, money means ministry in the kingdom. And you are a deeds guy because what you've done in the workplace and how you have built up these resources and then given them to church has enabled us to do this, that, and the other. And he was like, oh, I never thought of that. I thought the ministry was always for people who work for the church. And, and so I think part of it was the reframing of some of that, but also, for me, the first step is to offer what I'm doing to the Lord and to say, Lord, and, I did it last Friday. I said, Lord, I'm in front of 150 pounds of meat here. And we're on a clock, but I offer this to you. I bless it. And I pray that wherever this goes will be an offering, and then just waiting to see, how he leads, but not just how he leads, but who the people are that he brings my way. Because what I've also learned these last 6 months, that it's if I see a need, I'll meet a need, and maybe God will meet me in it, as opposed to, Lord, speak specifically. And it's also led to me really helpfully focusing not on the problems, but what is God doing? And my prayer also has been, Lord, make me easily moved. Just make me easily moved. And as I'm easily moved, I'm going to do this. And perhaps, it's the prayer of Jonathan, perhaps the Lord will be with us, for nothing can stop God from saving. I don't know if I rambled a bit there, Tim. I don't know if that answers it.
No, that's good. I love the offering because we all know that God loves smoked meat too.
Hey, it's Old Testament worship. Maybe not the pork.
That's OT.
Yeah, maybe not the pork, but smoked meat. That's so true. Well, and this brings up too, and I think this would be good for you to speak on, Dave, is, for our cohort attendees, this is their first, go around in the cohorts, but you have a unique role. I'm even just hearing you say this. Your role, it's like you have two hats. One, you're in full-time ministry, you're a pastor, but at the same time, you're a vicar, I apologize. And at the same time, you have a business, Dave. And so, back to that guy's comment and, saying, well, I'm not in full-time ministry. What would you say to people that kind of get trapped in that? What would you say to people in the church where we get locked up in the fact that we don't know what our platform is? We don't know what's in our hands. We don't feel like we have the right role to step out into that place in the kingdom. What would you say to just people listening in that place?
I'm always trying to reframe it for people in our church and say, hey, you're on the front line. I'm not. For me to have the conversations that you have and the opportunities you have takes me so much more effort because, there's certain parts of the population as a pastor you don't always interact with, right? And so that's the first thing. And then the second thing is I love what John Wimber used to say, which is, the meat is on the street, right? And that church is meant to be the training place for the marketplace.
Also a good barbecue comment.
Yeah, amen, right? Glory. Stop right there.
The meat is on the street.
Heck yeah. But the church is meant to be the training place for the marketplace. And it's one thing to get encouraged at church, but if you're in a work environment, I was talking to someone who works at university today, only Christian in the department, and we're talking about the challenges, and then they're getting ready to go, and I said, hey, we've only talked about the challenges. Let's talk about the opportunities. And they're like, what opportunities? I said, well, the encouragement, that you bring could be amazing. And this is someone in the physics department, right? And they're like, well, it's all science. And I said, hey, just encourage people because it may be foreign to them. And sure enough, they wrote back and said, you will not believe what's happened. No one's come to Christ, but the atmosphere in the lab is totally different now.
Wow.
So I think that's the goal, is just to try to resource people to realize that as soon as it's that old thing from, was it I can't remember who said it, now the name escapes me, but once you leave the church, you're entering the mission field, right? That to me, that's the mindset. And that's what I love about Novo, is that this is the whole point why we're gearing up.
Yeah.
Is to be salt and light.
Love it. And that is our role. And I just appreciate the power of your story, the normalcy of just your day-to-day life. You're living the kingdom, you're breathing the kingdom, bringing the kingdom. And so, dude, just thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. Hey, any last words that you could just speak blessing or anything you want to say?
Can I tell a quick story?
Yeah, please.
So, and this is amazing. We work with this charity in Oak Cliff, and they look after people living on the poverty line who suffer from severe mental health issues. And we got in touch with them, said, hey, can we bring lunch? And they said, sure, what were you thinking? Sandwiches? I said, no, we'll bring ribs, right? And they're like, oh, wow, yeah, our people never eat that. So the last thing you want to do is you never want to run out. So we did enough for 80 lunches and then a rack of ribs for every staff member and about 130 pounds of ribs. And we loaded up in the cooler and dropped it off. And I was like, okay, Lord, over to you. And, people were thrilled. They were just so excited. And then the director of the center called me that afternoon. I was like, oh, everything okay? I said, and she said, well, you said you were going to send us food for 80 meals. I said, oh, no, what happened? I said, oh, we got the 80. I said, yeah, well, I said, I know. Did you not get a rack left over? I said, oh, yeah. Yeah, the staff all got racks of ribs. I said, great. Well, what's the issue? He said, well, we've just been doing the math, and we're not really sure what happened. And I said, okay. We got the 80 lunches plated up, and then we had 80 for the next day, and then another 80 for the next day. And I said, what? But I didn't send you 300, almost 400 pounds of ribs. What are you talking about? So I don't know. They just kept coming out of the cooler. It's the craziest thing. And I said to the director, I said, well, what do you make of that? And this is what she said. I had been reading about the Jesus multiplying the 5,000, feeding the 5,000.
Wow.
And I was like, Lord, wouldn't it be great?
Come on.
And boom. And so little did I know. So that was awesome. I mean, that was crazy cool, right? Like, oh, Lord. So, even if people don't buy, it's really messed up how I make the meat order now, right? Do I order a third less? Yeah. And then here, another thing that happened on Friday, which was amazing, if I've got time, just one more.
Yeah.
So I wake up, and I'm like, I've got to go to Sam's to get just a little bit extra. I've got all the meat smoking away early. I get there at 8, and I'm by the frozen food section, just walking by, and I see this lovely staff member there, Patricia, and she's having a bad day. And you just know what a person having a bad day looks like. And so I go up to her and said, hey, what's going on? She said, oh, it's just awful, da-da-da. And I said, do you like ribs? Because, you told us to practice blessing, right? So I'm like, okay, well, let's practice. And she says, yeah, I love ribs. And I give her my smoked maple business card. And I said, call this number when you get off work. Because I get off at 12:30 today. I said, okay, call, and I'll tell you where you get the ribs from. It's like, all right. I had to go back again at noon. And I was just having one of those days. And anyway, I had a rack ready. So I get in the bag, get it wrapped up. And I drive to Sam's, and I'm walking in with this steaming bag of ribs, and it just smells amazing, right? Like their dog's howling in the background somewhere. And I go in, and they stop me. They said, are you returning? I was like, no, not returning. They said, you taking lunch to someone? Yes. So they let me in, and it's just a warehouse, and I'm going up and down. I can't find her anywhere. And so I go into the lunchroom where the staff are. They're kind of looking at me, and I was like, anyone seen Patricia? She's not here. No, she's already gone. I'm like, oh no. And so as I'm walking out, there's the general manager's office. Door is closed. I'm like, and I just feel this prompting to go in there. I was like, all right, what I got to lose? So I don't even knock. I open the door to the general manager's office, and I walk in. I said, Patricia, that you? And it was her. She was having this bad, I don't know if it was bad. It just did. The body language didn't look good. So the general manager turns, looks at me. Patricia sees me. She says, it's you. I said, of course it's me. I've got your ribs. She starts to cry. Sometimes in church you hug people. Other times a hug happens to you. Yeah. So this hug happened to me, and, I'm surprised I didn't get COVID. But anyway, so this happens. The general manager has this look of utter confusion. He says, why are you doing this? And I just said, hey, I have a small business called Smoked Maple. We do barbecue, and I buy a lot of stuff here. And the staff here are great. And so I was here earlier, and I saw Patricia was having a bad day. So why wouldn't I do this? Why wouldn't I bless her to make sure that the people working here, thrive, because my business thrives because of them? And so I wanted to, do a little act that would really bless her. And so I'm giving her a rack of ribs. I said, maybe you should give her a raise. At that point, I ran out of the office. But here's the thing. What I didn't realize going in is that everybody, like, saw me. You know, all the Sam's Clubs look the same. And so everybody saw me go into the manager's office, heard what I said with the door open, and as I walked out, everybody was staring at me. And so I was just like, okay, we're just going to walk quickly out. And anyway, so I just left. But I have no idea what happened in that conversation. I just know that what I did, it's exactly what you said on the, what Mark said is that, you know, we increase authority, we increase dominion in the kingdom through authority, and blessing people and prayers of blessing really are the sure way I know to increase God's dominion on earth. And the way that's working out at the moment, yes, it's happening at church, but I'm seeing it with fresh eyes being worked out through this small business I'm trying to run. And it's just so exciting. It is, and I hate roller coasters. I am not that guy to go to Six Flags, but because owning a small business is a roller coaster enough, but it's been awesome.
And you've got barbecues multiplying in your backyard. You've got ribs multiplying in the hands of people that need it. And man, you're getting people raises at Sam's Club.
Well, I don't know if we got there yet, but I won't claim it yet, but maybe next week. And Tim, I just realized this. So my company's called Smoked Maple, and you're at Maple
Valley.
Yeah,
That's right.
We need to do a destination celebration.
There we go, man. Smoked Maple Valley.
Yeah,
2020.
Well, that might invite a wildfire. Let's not pray that in yet.
That's awesome.
I love it.
Oh, that's so cool. If she gets a raise that's 2/3 higher, I think that's really we'll have you back on for that show.
And then she's got to come to the church, start tithing. No, that's the pastor hat going too far.
Hey, invite her on the podcast, man.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll see. And, you know, that's the other thing, too, is what I've realized, especially with that multiplication thing, is, you know, the great gift the poor have to give us is their gift of faith and their experience of God. And the people who were with me when that happened, their minds were blown. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, hey, these people at this center are going to get fed, right? But what we get in return from them is so much more valuable than what we've given them, because we have a modern day example of God supernaturally breaking through the order of this world to show them he loves them. So,
yeah.
I love that.
You know, it so reminds me, I heard this, you know, quote is in the kingdom, there aren't problems. There's only possibilities. And God is bringing new order. He's bringing restoration. He's bringing all old things to become new. And I think your story, Dave, is really bringing that into a day where everybody's like, there are so many problems around, but you're saying, hey, I see a lot of possibilities. I see a lot of the kingdom that could break out in my day-to-day at Sam's Club with barbecue ribs, with being generous. You're just giving the Lord your literal fishes and loaves, and he's multiplying it. So thank you, dude.
And one thing that I just realized too is the thing, like anybody in business, I have all these doubts that come in. And the one thing that blew me away, and I think it was what the person I was praying with prayed for me, is it was like, hey, there's great barbecue all over the city, right? And I don't even dare eat it now because I get, you know, I start to wonder, oh, what are they doing, all this kind of stuff. And what the person, I think, prayed for me was that I would know that it isn't so much about what I'm doing, but it's the story I bring to it. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like, so Tim, you're in a construction business, and there are a lot of construction, but it's your story that is so compelling, and it's the story of God working through us that is just so compelling. And that would be my encouragement to people in business doing the cohort stuff, is that it's as much about the story behind it than what it is we're doing that is so compelling.
Love it. Dave, thanks for coming on to share your story, and really appreciate what you're doing and inspired by your life, man.
Oh, absolute joy and honor.
dude. I love it. So I just love hearing stories about how people use just where God has them to impact people around them.
Yeah.
And the thing that I love about Dave's story too is he's just as surprised about what's happening as we are hearing the story. There's kind of a playfulness there in this, like, you've got to be kidding me, atmosphere to it. And that, to me, in my life, it so resonates with the things that God does. And I love, I just love the fact that he uses things that we don't think he could ever that he could ever use to really be the thing that provides just incredible impact in and around us. And I mean, if you can't listen to Dave's story and be like salivating in the background and just wanting to get some barbecue, there might be something wrong. So
well,
that's
think
what I
about
love
this too, Tim.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a true story of like the multiplication of fishes and loaves. Like, let's just think about that. In the West, in day-to-day life, like, what is happening? You know what I mean? Like, this is the gospel story happening in our day-to-day lives, like, of what Jesus did 2,000 years ago. He's still doing it today. So I'm just blown away by this.
Yeah. And I think there's, you can go into so many different things. There's care there. There's kindness there. Mm-hmm. There is, in so many different levels of people seeing what God's doing and having to answer the question, what just happened?
Literally.
And one of the things that I feel like the Lord has kind of spoken clearly to me is this idea that miracles occur upon the death of coincidence.
Say more. What does that mean?
Yeah, so I think in our language, we often either confirm or deny things we can't explain that are God things with our words. It's like we don't have a spiritual understanding, so we call something a coincidence. Or we don't believe that God is really for us, or we don't, like, if something really good happens, it's the, wow, what luck I have, or what are the coincidences, or what are the chances? And and so we use this language to basically defund the currency of God, which is blessing us, blessing those around us, and all with just our language. And so that idea that miracles occur on the death of coincidence, when you say coincidences don't happen, they don't exist anymore. What you're left with is, wow, like someone, God, is really involved in my life in very small ways and in very big ways and ways I cannot understand.
Yeah, totally. Well, and it makes me think too, I mean, there's a guy named Philip Jenkins. He wrote this book, The Next Christendom. And one of the things he says is in the West, the greatest distance that we have is actually believing that the supernatural, it intermingles with the natural. Like we don't see that. We're like, we still think in a dualistic way. Like one is supernatural, one is natural, and the rest of the world doesn't think that way. Everything is one. Everything's happening at the same time, and that's actually the biblical worldview. I mean, even Ephesians talks about this war. We don't war against flesh and blood, but principalities. Like, do we really believe that? And so I think Dave's story is inviting us into the normalcy of spiritual authority in our day-to-day life. We don't turn that on. We are sons and daughters of God. We are priests of God. That's who we are. Like, even if we're aware of it or not. And that goes throughout our day. In the last session, we talked a lot about our missional identity statements. We are the fragrance of Christ. We are the light and salt of the world. And so I think his story is reminding us that this is our being. This is who we are in God, in Christ. Do we know that? Are we accepting and receiving that identity? And the miraculous happens in that. You don't just turn on like, I'm going to do miracles. Like it's not like that. It's like, I think God just surprises us when we're walking naturally in who he's called us to be.
Yeah. And the thing I love about Dave's story, I love a lot of things about Dave's story, but Dave's answer to unanswerable questions is ribs. It's so simple. And I think it surprised him at first, and now it's just like, what's needed in this crazy situation that nobody has an answer for? Probably ribs.
Probably ribs.
Probably ribs. And so I just love that idea that, Dave's been doing barbecue for a long, long time. And that's just something that he does. And then that's what God uses. So he's blessing the thing that's already there and then putting kind of purpose and meaning behind what is a talent or a passion and a small business.
Yeah. Well,
really
I love at
powerful.
the beginning, too, he talks about, he sees the need. And that's really what stands out to me as like, he's turning his normal day-to-day small business not into a place where he's trying to grow a business to, he's not focused on his business. The focus is he's trying to meet a need. He's kind of saying like, Lord, this is what you've given me. How can I use it for your glory? And I think it's a good reminder for us as just normal day-to-day disciples of Jesus. Like, Lord, you've placed me here in my 9-to-5 job. You've placed me here to be a mom, a dad, fill in the blank, whatever that is. Like, this is where you've put me. Now, Lord, how can you use this for your glory? Will you change my awareness? What are the needs around me? How does that work when I'm a doctor? How does that work when I'm a builder? I mean, you could speak on this, Tim. How does it work when I'm a mom, a dad? I mean, fill in the blank of all of our jobs and roles. But how can God use the place where he has already put me, the role that I'm already in, to fill needs around me? What if God has actually put me here for a reason? And it's changing our perspective of, what if that is the place, and I think it is, that the miraculous happens?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, you mentioned that. So, quick recap. I'm a builder. So I work for a custom home builder. And I think some of the ways that, I've kind of been invited in that world to partner with what God's doing is I do a lot of our sales, right? So I'm in people's homes and, they're coming to me with a need, which is their house is jacked up. And then our solution is remodeling, renovating, or, throwing a stick of dynamite at it and starting over. And so the thing that I've found through things is like people are coming to me with a need. And I think that's the idea, is that people around us all are coming to us with needs. And it's that awareness piece of what's reading between the lines to really see like what is God's doing. And, even in business, right? So we're builders and we have a lot of employees, and I have a conference room that's largely empty. How can I use that conference room for the kingdom? And I think that's a place for people to dig. If you're like, well, I don't do ribs, right? I'm not in other people's houses trying to sell them remodels. Like, what is my thing? And I'd say it's sort of look at an area where you have maybe some amount of excess, or excess time, excess space, excess capacity, and then look at like maybe some of your natural talents, and then how can you fill those things up, right? I have I have a living room with 4 couches in it. Well, wouldn't it be great if there was people in those couches? What does that look like? I love to bake, or I'm good with kids, and there's a lot of kids in my neighborhood. Like, where's the like natural connection there? And just asking God, like, you've created me for purpose, and you've placed me in the place where you want me to use that purpose. Can you help me connect the dots?
Yeah.
What are they? And then embolden me to say yes, and so that I can see, my version of multiplication happen in my context. And that's really I'd say it's this exciting and terrifying thought and question that this story helps be like, this is a guy who maybe asked a question, maybe felt, shoved into the deep end, but everything that comes next is an incredible story about God's faithfulness, goodness, and just excitement about you seeing what he's up to and partnering with him.
That's it. And I think it takes the pressure off, of we need to start a new thing. We need to, I need a new kingdom assignment, like whatever that is. If you remember that from the last session, it's like, no, like God's already given us kingdom assignments. They're all around us in our day-to-day life. And so we just wanted to come with you today, to share this story with you of what Dave was doing in Dallas, what he's still doing with his business, believing God for transformation in his community. And I think it's reminding us to, Tim and I were talking before this podcast of, Jesus calls the disciples. And, I'm thinking of Peter specifically. And he said, I'm going to make you a fisher of men. And his occupation was a fisherman, right? So and then Jesus uses that and he said, you're doing this for the natural, but I want to do this eternally. I want you to build fishers of men. And so what is that? What's that for us? What is that for us to step into our roles as priests, as sons and daughters of the living God, to be fishers of men? And so we want to encourage you with a story. You might not have a smoker. You might not have, the resources. What do you have in your hand, though? Is it, like Tim said, is it couches? Is it, is it an office space? Is it a conversation? What is it that you can give to the world around you and ask the Lord, hey, would you do the miraculous through what I do have? And so, hey, we wanted to encourage you today. God bless you guys. Thanks for being with us. Excited to see you in the next episode.
If you have an encouraging story, we would love to hear it. Email us at cohort.stories@novo.org.